What happened next? I'm not going to pretend the fallout was simple, because it wasn't. Some people came up to me that night and told me I'd done the right thing, that Mark deserved to know, that they respected me for saying what needed to be said. Other people were furious, not at the affair, but at me, for the way I'd done it. My manager pulled me aside within about 10 minutes and told me, quietly but firmly, that regardless of the personal situation, that had been enormously inappropriate for a company event and there would likely be consequences. There were consequences. I got a formal written warning the following week for what HR called conduct unbecoming at a company function, even though nobody could point to a specific rule I'd technically broken. Derek quietly resigned about 3 weeks later. I don't know if it was pushed or voluntary, and honestly, I don't care. Dana took an extended leave of absence and never came back. I heard through mutual contacts that she and Mark separated within a month and are now going through what everyone describes as an extremely ugly divorce, with the kids caught in the middle, which is the part of this whole story that I genuinely can't feel good about, no matter how justified I still believe I was. Mark called me about 2 weeks after the party. I was terrified to pick up, honestly, not knowing if he was going to scream at me or thank me or something in between. He didn't scream. He was quiet, exhausted sounding, and he said something I still think about constantly. He said he wished I'd told him sooner, privately, instead of in front of the entire office. That part, he was angry about, and honestly, fair enough, but he also said that some small part of him had known something was wrong for months and had been too scared to look at it directly, and that at least now he wasn't the only person in the room who didn't know the truth about his own marriage. That conversation didn't fix anything, but it was the moment I stopped feeling like I'd done something purely destructive and started feeling like I'd done something that was necessary but executed in the worst possible way. My wife and I talked about it a lot in the weeks that followed. She agreed the truth needed to come out. She was less sure the Christmas party had been the right stage for it, and if I'm honest with myself, she's right. I could have called Mark directly the moment I found out at the bed and breakfast instead of giving Dana one more chance she didn't deserve. I could have told him privately, quietly, given him the dignity of finding out in a way that didn't turn his worst night into a public spectacle that people are probably still talking about at holiday parties years from now. Where I landed. Almost a year has passed since that night. I still work at the same firm, though the atmosphere took a long time to feel normal again, and honestly, some of it never fully did. People still bring it up occasionally, usually with a kind of careful, curious energy, like they're not sure if it's okay to ask me about it directly. I don't regret that the truth came out. I do regret, more than almost anything, the way it came out and the audience, the spectacle, the fact that Mark's worst moment became a story other people got to witness and later retell at their own dinner tables. He deserved better than that, even while he deserved the truth. Dana and I haven't spoken since that night. I think about reaching out sometimes, and then I think about the year of lies, the 3 separate times she looked me directly in the eyes and chose deception over honesty even after I'd given her every possible off-ramp, and I don't reach out. Maybe that makes me stubborn. Maybe it just means some friendships don't survive the weight of what they're built to carry. Mark and I still talk occasionally. Not the way we used to, that easy 4th of July, barbecue sauce kind of friendship is gone, probably for good, because I'm tied up in the worst night of his life whether I meant to be central to it or not. But he doesn't blame me anymore, not really. Last time we talked, he told me he was doing okay. Dating again, slowly. Learning to trust his own instincts again after spending a year being gaslit into thinking he was imagining things. I think about that parking garage a lot. I think about the version of that night where I round the corner immediately instead of hiding behind a pillar, where I say something in the moment instead of carrying it silently for a year, hoping someone else's conscience would do the work my courage should have done months earlier. I don't know if that version ends any better. I just know it probably ends with less collateral damage than 140 witnesses and a microphone. So that's the story. I exposed my coworker's affair in front of the entire office at the Christmas party, and I'd tell the truth again if I had to choose between silence and honesty. But if I could go back, I'd choose a quieter room, a smaller audience, and a version of myself brave enough to act the very first night I suspected something was wrong, instead of the night I finally ran out of patience for being lied to. Some truths need to come out. They just don't all deserve a stage. A few things people keep asking me. Since this happened, and since a version of this story started circulating around our industry, apparently gossip travels between architecture firms faster than I ever appreciated. I've gotten asked the same handful of questions over and over, so I figured I'd address them here too, since I still find myself turning them over in my head at 2 in the morning more often than I'd like to admit. The first thing people ask is whether I was jealous of Derek, or whether there was ever anything romantic between Dana and me that made this personal in a way I wasn't admitting. I understand why people ask. It's a natural assumption. A man doesn't usually blow up his own career trajectory over a friend's marriage unless there's something else going on underneath it. But no. There wasn't. Dana was my friend the way a sibling is a friend, messy, loyal, occasionally exhausting, deeply familiar. My wife has never once doubted that, even in the ugliest weeks after the party, and honestly, that fact matters more to me than almost anything else in this story. Whatever I did, right or wrong, I did it because I loved 2 people who trusted each other and watched that trust get quietly, methodically hollowed out from the inside for the better part of a year. The second thing people ask is whether I'd have done it differently if I could rewind the clock, and I already answered that above, but I want to be even more specific about it, because I think the honest answer matters more than the tidy one. If I could go back, I would have told Mark the very same week I saw them in the parking garage instead of trying to manage the situation through Dana for almost a year. I told myself I was giving her a chance to fix it on her own terms, out of loyalty, out of respect for her autonomy as an adult capable of making her own decisions about her own marriage. In hindsight, I think a good chunk of that was actually cowardice wearing the costume of respect. It was easier to confront my friend privately, over and over, hoping she'd eventually do the hard thing herself, than it was to be the person who delivered devastating news to a man who trusted me. I was, in a very real sense, protecting myself from an uncomfortable conversation by pretending I was protecting Dana's dignity. That's a distinction I didn't fully understand about my own motives until months after the party, sitting with a therapist my wife finally convinced me to see, unpacking why a normally conflict-avoidant person had detonated a very public, very theatrical confrontation instead of ever having the quiet, private one that would have actually served everyone better. The third thing people ask, usually more gently, is how my own marriage survived watching all of this up close. I think, honestly, it made us stronger in a strange, uncomfortable way. Watching a marriage I respected get quietly destroyed by secrecy made my wife and me much more deliberate about the small honesties in our own relationship, not hiding a receipt, not downplaying a bad day, not letting resentment simmer silently because bringing it up feels like more effort than it's worth in the moment. We started doing something we call a Sunday check-in, 15 minutes, no phones, just an honest rundown of anything that's been sitting uncomfortably in either of our chests that week. It sounds almost embarrassingly simple written out like that, but I credit it, at least partly, with getting us through a year that put a genuine strain on us too, even though the affair itself had nothing to do with either of us directly. The part one still think about most. There's one image from that night that replays in my head more than any other, more than the silence after I spoke, more than Mark's face changing in real time, more than Dana's hands over her mouth. It's a small thing, almost nothing, but it's the thing that actually wakes me up sometimes. Earlier in the evening, before any of it happened, before the toast, before the mic, I watched Mark cut a piece of steak off his plate and put it on Dana's, without a word, without being asked, because she'd mentioned offhand that hers was slightly underdone and he remembered, from some conversation years earlier, that she hated rare meat. It was such a small, unremarkable act of care. The kind of thing you do automatically for someone after enough years together that you've stopped even registering it as kindness, it's just what you do, because you know them, because you've built a life around knowing the small things about them that nobody else bothers to learn. I think about that steak more than almost anything else from that entire night. I think about how much quiet, accumulated attention it takes to build a marriage capable of producing a gesture that small and that automatic, and how completely, casually it had all been put at risk for something that, by every account I've heard since, wasn't even really about love. It was about attention, about feeling seen in a new way after years of feeling invisible in an old one, which is a real and human thing to feel, but it's not a thing that requires burning down a life built on small gestures like moving a piece of steak from one plate to another without even being asked. That's the part that still gets me, more than the drama of the party itself, more than the fallout, more than the written warning or the resignation or the divorce filings I heard about secondhand. It's the steak. It's the years of steak, essentially, years of small, quiet acts of love that got treated as though they didn't matter as much as they did, right up until the moment they were gone and everyone in that room, including the person who'd been giving them, finally understood exactly what had been at stake all along. I don't know if that's a lesson or just a wound I keep pressing on to see if it still hurts. Probably both. Most true things usually are.